Andreas here with this month's mobility. So we're focusing on the shoulder in June. What we're going to do in each mobility class is each month it will be a different joint or different movement, and we'll take you through a little bit of an assessment and then teach you some stuff that you can do to stretch and mobilise. We'll also do a video each month so that for those of you who do attend, it's a bit of a kind of memory check, and for those of you who can't attend, you can still see what we're doing. So with the shoulder, we're focusing on 4 main movements, which are all specific to CrossFit. So we're going to work on our overhead mobility, which will help with any kipping or gymnastics. We're going to focus on our ability to get out wide into receiving position for an overhead squat or your snatch. And we're going to work on our rotation both externally and internally, both really important on the pull for any Olympic lifting, and then also for your front rack position. The goal with the mobility classes is for it to be stuff you can do yourselves with minimal equipment. So you can come to the class or come to the gym before your session, or it can be stuff you do at home whenever you need to. So we're going to give you 4 exercises for those 4 different areas, and we'll just kind of talk over a few little tweaks you can do and how long we'll be holding them for. So the first one we're going to work on is our overhead position. So we mentioned this is really good for our kind of kipping gymnastics, but also just getting the barbell overhead and strict press, stroke, those kind of movements. So we're using the floor. The key thing is when we're in a crawling position, we want to make sure our hips stay directly over the knees or slightly further forward. And then before we go into the stretch, we get a slight hollow, which will mean it targets the shoulders more than it does the upper back. A progression for that will be going to kind of a narrower grip, a narrow hand position, or more into a single arm variation, but making sure it's always across your midline. That's the first one. The second one we're going to go narrower. So thumbs touching, or even go to fingers touching, but still get the round in the shoulders. And then you can go to single arm, just make sure it's in the middle. So next position we're working on is our ability to get into the receiving position for our snatch or into the overhead squat. So we're going to use the floor to lever our arm into a bit of a stretch. We're going to do 2 positions. One is just generally good for opening up the chest, particularly for those of us who kind of work at the desk as well. And then one with a slight tweak to the hand position makes it much more specific to when our kind of head's coming through for that snatch position. So using the floor, hand is always going to be just above the shoulder, but you're making sure that it's not too high. You're going to really slowly rotate yourself around until you get your first bit of stretch. So the goal with this is not to go as far as you feel you can. Just go to where you get your pull and then relax into that position. Second variation is out into more of a Y position, which will carry over much more to your kind of snatch and targets the pec minor, much smaller muscle in your chest. Same thing, but you might find this is a bit more intense, so you just go a little bit more gently, and again just hold. So we're now going into our external rotation stretch. So this is really important for our front rack. Again using the floor, but just slightly different to the kind of the chest variation. We're doing it with our arm bent. The bone is always going to be slightly higher than your shoulder. And then to progress that, we're going to pop something under our wrist as well, which gets a bit more rotation. Both of these are really strong and can feel a little bit more deep into the shoulder itself. So go gently when you're doing it. Second variation, so here we're using fraction plates, but anything that gives you a little bit of height, you want to make sure the wrist is on it, so you don't just flex on the wrist to compensate. Still make sure elbow is higher than shoulder, and this tends to be much stronger and gentle. Our fourth exercise is working on internal rotation, really important in our Olympic lifting, for keeping the elbows high with both our snatch and clean, but also really important for any ring work or bar muscle up transitions that you might be working on. Again, we're using the floor, we're going to be lying on our sides. The key thing with this is that we stay completely stacked with our top shoulder above our bottom shoulder, and that we keep the bottom shoulder in contact with the ground. So once I'm down there, I'll show you what we don't want to do, because this is something that can be quite common in this movement. So, line on your side, elbow in line or slightly higher than the shoulder, stay stacked, and as you reach, what you don't want to do is let this start to come off the floor. So if I do that, it looks like I've got quite good range there. If I keep planted through that shoulder, that is where I get my stretch, and this is the better way to do it, because this is then stretching the shoulder rather than just pushing the front of the shoulder forward. In this position, you're just going to hold gently, relax out. What I normally suggest to people is that we go for a minute in these positions. The reason for that is 30 seconds or less is shown in the research does not actually lead to any physical changes in your muscle length. 30 seconds or more does. A minute gives us a bit more time just to relax into the movement and also let our neurological system just ease into it too. General kind of format, the basic one I suggest would be do a minute of each movement each side. If you have an area that's a little bit tighter, so let's say your left side is tighter than the right, you can also bias that side, so do a minute left, minute right, minute left. And the ideal would actually just be doing 2 rounds full of this, so you get to do 2 lots a minute on each of these movements. Each month we're going to be changing the area we're focusing on, and then potentially going to some movement specific mobility sessions as well. So if there's anything you'd like to see or work on in particular, let one of the coaches know, or myself, when you're here, or just drop us a message. Let me know how you get on with this, and if you've got any feedback, just let us know.